Dark Saviors has been a big hit with duelists everywhere. Just a couple weeks after its release, we've already seen duelists succeeding with both the Sky Strikers and the for-hire monsters in their decks. But today I want to give a little love to the Vampires, the Dark Saviors part of Dark Saviors. They were my favorite cards when we were developing the set, and I think they're a lot of fun and can do some pretty powerful things that you might not be expecting. So let's take a little time to talk about Vampires, one of the oldest zombie-type decks in the entire game. So one of the things that got me really excited when we went back to do Vampires this time around is that we were finally making Vampires that do vampire things. They bite other monsters to bring them over to your side. And they suck blood and turn it into your life points, that sort of thing. So the basic vampire mechanic this time around is that when these vampires destroy your opponent's monster by battle, at the end of the battle phase, those monsters come back to your side, and now they're under your control. And in addition to being able to bite monsters and turn them to your side, they've also got familiars and retainers and small creatures like bats and I don't know what vampire retainer is. I guess he's kind of a wolf. But these smaller critters that can go and get you other cards out of your deck. So making a vampire deck that feels like a vampire deck was very exciting for me. And the artwork turned out beautifully. I really love the mechanics we have for these. Vampires are really cool. So I want to talk a little bit about why you might want to try them out. So first things first, vampires are a zombie type deck. And whenever you're dealing with a zombie type deck, you're going to be able to get a lot of summons in a very small amount of time. And a lot of them are going to be very controlled. You'll have good access to your cards as well. And one of the reasons for that is because every zombie deck gets to play these cards: Shiranui Solitaire, Unizombie, and Mizuki. If you ask 10 duelists, what's the best zombie type monster, 8 of them will tell you that it's Unizombie. The 9th will tell you that it's Shiranui Solitaire because it special summons Unizombie from your deck. And the last one will tell you that it's Mizuki because that's the thing you send with Unizombie so that you can do the combos with Unizombie and Shiranui Solitaire. Now that might make it seem like all zombie decks kind of play the same, but they really don't. And vampires in particular are good at demonstrating that. And I get a lot of comments about this, especially when I go out to events and that sort of thing. A lot of people are always asking for a super rare Unizombie since he's the consensus best zombie monster. Well, no, we're not going to make him a super rare. He is far too good to be a super rare. We're going to make him an ultra rare instead, like Shiranui Solitaire and the Duelist Saga version of Mizuki, so you can have them all match. And you're going to be able to get that ultra rare Unizombie in Battles of Legend Relentless Revenge at the end of June. So I'm really excited for that. I can't wait to get some of those so I can get matching zombie suites. But yeah, you get these in all your zombie decks, and we'll talk about the basic combo that you use with that later. But the vampires also have their own specific ways of getting more monsters on the field. So there's Vampire's Domain. That's a new card from Dark Saviors. It's got 2 abilities. One gives you a life-draining ability that makes it so when your vampires deal damage, you gain that much life. And the other ability lets you pay 500 life points to get an extra normal summon of a vampire this turn. And you'll be able to search this out of your deck pretty easily with some other vampire cards. There's also Vampire Awakening. If you remember Abyss Sphere from the Mermail deck, Vampire Awakening is very much the same without all the nasty bits about not being able to play spells or any of that. Just summons a vampire from your deck and then destroys it at the end phase. And there are ways around having that monster be destroyed, or maybe you might want it to be destroyed. It's up to the game situation. The vampire deck is actually quite flexible when you think about it. And there's Vampire Scarlet Scourge as well. When you normally special summon Scarlet Scourge, you can pay 1,000 to summon another vampire from your graveyard. It can't attack that turn though, but that's okay, because a lot of times you're going to be summoning a smaller monster that you're not planning to attack with anyways. You're just going to use it as link material for Vampire Sucker, the link monster from Flames of Destruction. And that's also got some summoning aids as well. It actually summons a monster to your opponent's field as a zombie. And then you get to draw a card, but she also lets you tribute your opponent's zombie monsters to summon your bigger monsters. So she's kind of an aid in that way. In addition to all this zombie type support and all the vampire spells, you also get to use all of the regular special summoning cards as well. In particular, zombie decks are good at loading the graveyard and bringing things back. So obviously, Monster Reborn helps, but that's limited. So you can use other similar cards like World Legacy Succession from Flames of Destruction. Remember, you've got this Link monster now. So once you summon it, you can use World Legacy Succession to special summon one of your zombies back to one of the zones she's pointing to. And then another card from Flames of Destruction that I think is particularly good in this deck is Super Team Buddy Force Unite. I see a lot of duelists a little confused about Buddy Force Unite and when you would want to use it, and this is definitely one of the cases where you would want to use it. You play a lot of high-level monsters since the vampires are primarily level 5 and 6. Vamp is level 7. But in general, you're going to want to play a lot of monsters that you would normally have to tribute summon, and that leads to situations where sometimes you can get them stuck in your hand. So you'll have, your uni-zombie on the field, but you won't be able to, both tribute summon the monster in your hand and do the other things you want to do with uni-zombie at the same time. And a card like Buddy Force Unite can help you get those cards out of your hand when you've got a lot of them stuck, or if you can get everything out of your hand, then it's just a free revival later on in the duel. So in a deck like Vampires, Super Team Buddy Force Unite is one of those cards that makes your good hands great, but your not so good hands upgrade. They get closer to good. And it really helps you just play when you have a hand that's not the best. Now, in addition to all of these summoning tricks, Vampires are particularly good at finding the cards they need when they need them. They have excellent card selection, and that starts with Vampire Familiar and Vampire Retainer from Dark Saviors. So these two, if they're special summoned, you can pay 500 life to search your deck for a Vampire card. Retainer gets Spell and Traps, Familiar gets Monsters. So you don't necessarily need to load your deck up with too many high-level monsters. You could play, just one of all of, say, one of each of the tribute vampires, and then just search for whichever ones you need with Familiar when you need them. Now, you'll probably play more on the Spell and Trap cards because a lot of them are extremely powerful. So, in general, Retainer's a little stronger than Familiar because you have multiple ways of getting monsters out of your deck between Unizombie and Familiar and all that. But these are both excellent cards, and pretty much they're mainly what you're going to be special summoning with these, so that you can get a search each time. And Vampire Sucker is also a good source of cards. Once per turn, if a zombie is special summoned from the graveyard, you get to draw a card with her. That counts if you are reviving a monster from your opponent's graveyard and turning it into a zombie with her effect. That monster is summoned as a zombie, so you do get to draw a card for that. And if you have built your deck correctly and you've set it up well, you can kind of start chaining draws together and get a free draw during each player's turn if things are going particularly well. Vampire Sucker is a very powerful card, and you'll use her quite a lot when you're playing with vampires. And the last thing that I think gives vampires a nice advantage is that they're very good at eliminating enemy monsters in non-standard ways. When I say non-standard ways, I mean you don't just have to destroy them. You're not just playing Raigeki and destroying all your opponent's monsters. There are a lot of things that can become immune to that sort of thing. And some of them can even become immune to battle. So normally, if your monster can't be destroyed by card effects and it can't be destroyed by battle, you might think vampires would have a hard time since they have to destroy things by battle. If they want to steal them, they have to bite them first. But the vampire deck has a lot of ways to get around them. So Vampire Sucker, for example, if you can turn your opponent's monster into a zombie, and there's a good chance you're playing Zombie World for that. Zombie World, incidentally, pretty darn good at shutting down true Draco decks. So if you're still having trouble with them in your local environment or regionals or what have you, then a vampire deck with Zombie World might be something you want to consider. But Vampire Sucker can tribute monsters away so that you can tribute summon your own monsters, and that doesn't destroy, and it doesn't, it's not destruction by card effect, it's not destruction by battle, so you can get around monsters that are immune to things that way. Another thing you can do is just take control of them. Vampire Red Baron, as long as you can actually target your opponent's monster, you can swap one of your vampires for their monster. And that's best when you've got something just laying around like Vampire Retainer. So maybe you special summon Vampire Retainer during your opponent's turn on their end phase and got a search off it. Well, on your turn, you can play Vampire Red Baron, swap your Retainer for their monster, then have Red Baron attack your Retainer. And when you do that, well, at the end of the battle phase, the Retainer's going to come back. It's been special summoned again, so you can get its effect again. Now, any monster that you steal even temporarily, say something like mind control, for example, you're probably not going to have to give back, ever. And that's because of Vampire Sheridan, the Xyz monster from Dark Saviors. Its summoning condition allows you, so normally you need 2+ level 6 monsters, and that's important because you can use as many monsters as you want on this. So if you have, say, Vampire Red Baron and a bunch of opponent's monsters, well, this other effect lets you treat your opponent's monsters that you control as if they were level 6. Only if they have a level, though, so you can't do this with Link monsters or other Xyz monsters, but all the other kinds of monsters, you can treat them as level 6, and you can pile all of them and say you're Red Baron onto Vampire Sheridan, and give them 4 materials. And why do you want them to have that many materials? Well, because you're going to use a lot of them. Vampire Sheridan has another non-destruction effect to get rid of monsters. So you can detach a material from them and target any card your opponent controls and send it to the graveyard. Now, if a monster is sent to your opponent's graveyard by battle or, is it by battle or card effect? Yeah, by a card effect or a monster is destroyed by battle in your opponent's graveyard. So it's like a super version of this ability. You can detach another material and summon that monster to your field in defense position. Then you've got Vampire Domination. While this isn't strictly a removal card, it does remove monsters. It's a counter trap that can negate a spell or trap card or the effect of a monster that's activated while you control a vampire. So you can take out spells and traps that way, and you can also negate monster effects. And if you manage to destroy a monster that way, well, you get to gain life points equal to its attack points. It's pretty good like that, but even if you can't destroy the monster, you can still negate the activation of its effect. And that's useful pretty much all the time. And then there's Vampire Vamp. Vampire Vamp, if she's normal summoned or another vampire is normal summoned, she can target a monster who on your opponent's field with more attack than she has and equip it to herself. And then she will gain the combined attack of all the monsters equipped to her. This is a card originally from Primal Origins. It was a world premiere card originally. I really like this card, Vampire Vamp. And if she's sent to the graveyard while she's equipped with her own effect, she gets summoned back to the field. So she's got kind of that resurrection flavor of the old Vampire Lord, in addition to the steal and monsters bit that the new vampires do. She's kind of a nice bridge between the two generations of vampires. So what are some basic things that you can do with this deck? Well, there's always the basic Shiranui Solitaire combo. So let's just go over that because it's always good to know this combo. So you start with Shiranui Solitaire, and you activate its effect, tribute it. Let's see, graveyard is over here. Special summons a zombie tuner with 0 defense from your deck. It has to be a tuner. You can't get Vampire, Retainer, or Familiar as they are not tuners. And you get Unizombie. Now you activate Unizombie's effect to send a zombie to the deck to the graveyard to increase his level. And you send Mizuki. And then you banish Mizuki for its effect to special summon back Solitaire. And now you have 2 level 4 monsters on the field. And where you can go from there, I mean, the classic play is always Psyframe Lord Omega. If you're going first, it's hard to go wrong with that. But if you have an idea of what your matchup is, you might want to go with a rank 4 monster like Abyss Dweller. And then, of course, you can always use Vampire Sucker if you have a bunch of other backup. Or it depends on the rest of your hand. I mean, you're just using one Shiranui Solitaire for this. You got 4 other cards. They could be anything. Maybe Vampire Sucker is the right play, and you can start chaining together all those draws and keep her protected. Vampire Fraulein is a particularly good card to help protect your Vampire Sucker. Oh, where is she? She's also a special summoner. I can't believe I didn't talk about her. Let's show her off just a bit. There she is. You can summon her from your hand when a monster declares an attack, and she can pay life points to increase the attack and defense of battling vampires. Quite good. So all of these things are possible to you if you open up with Shiranui Solitaire. Now, if you want to get a little more complicated, there are a couple useful 2-card combos. And most of these start with Unizombie, not Shiranui Solitaire. So one of the things that kind of hamstrings a lot of other zombie decks is that if you draw Unizombie instead of Shiranui Solitaire, they don't do as much. But there are a lot of things that you can discard and still be able to do a little bit of a combo. So let's say you've got a Unizombie, and you've got, let's say you drew the Mizuki, or you have Vampire Retainer or Familiar in your hand. This works best if you have Mizuki or Retainer. Familiar is not quite as good in this particular scenario. But if you have Mizuki, you can choose either. So what you do is you'll summon your Unizombie. And the first thing we'll do is get Mizuki into the graveyard. You either discard it for one effect if it's in your hand, or send it from your deck to the graveyard if it's not. And then you use the other effect of Unizombie to send whichever of the other two cards you either want or have. Let's say we send Retainer and get that Spell or Trap. And we'll move Familiar over here for now. Okay, so now Unizombie's level 5. And we can banish Mizuki, special summon Retainer, pay 500 to activate its effect, and now we get any of the Vampire Spell or Trap cards. So let's just pull all of those out just for a moment. There's Awakening, Domination, Domain, and Desire. So the only one of these that we haven't talked about yet is Vampire's Desire. What you take is entirely dependent on the game state, but I can tell you a couple neat general things that you can do. So, obviously this is a 5 and a 2, so you could use Black Rose Dragon and blow everything up. That's always an option. But one fun thing you can do is use Vampire's Desire here. So Vampire's Desire has two abilities. One of them lets you send a monster you control to the graveyard to revive a targeted vampire from your graveyard, but the other one lets you target a monster on the field and send a vampire from your deck to the graveyard with a different level, and then have the targeted monster change to that level. And that's the effect I think is really interesting. So you could use it on Unizombie and send a level 6, like Scarlet Scourge, to the graveyard, and then you'd have your 6 and 2 to make Cyframe Lord Omega, or Starlight Red Light Archfiend, or whatever level 8 synchro you want. It's frequently going to be Omega, though. But what if you send a 5 instead? Well, let's say we do that. We'll send Fraulein, and we'll target Retainer with it, and have Retainer's level match Unizombie. Well, now you've got a bunch of interesting choices. I mean, there's level 10 synchros, sure, but I'm thinking more, what if you also had Droll and Lockbird in your hand? Well, in that case, you've got 2 level 5s, and you could summon Artifact Durandal. So a lot of people who've just started dueling in the last couple years, their first experience with the Droll and Lockbird combo to eliminate your opponent's hand is with Trickstars. And, you know, I can't blame you if you just started for thinking that the combo originated there, but it didn't. It originated back in 2014 with Artifact Durandal. That was the first time we saw it, and it works a very similar way. So Artifact Durandal has this ability that lets you detach material to have both players shuffle their hands into their decks and then draw that many cards. And essentially you can use it like the Trickstar Reincarnation combo. So if your opponent searches something and puts it in your hand, you can activate Durandal and chain Droll and Lockbird. And the end result is that nobody gets a hand, but hopefully you're the one with the big monster on the field and you'll wind up winning the duel off of that. So that's just something to think about. That's an advantage that you can get off of the Vampire cards that you can't really get from other places. Now, if you were going to throw a third card in here, you would want a summoning enabler, something like Vampire Domain, or Call of the Mummy, if you had something like that. If you have something that lets you get that extra monster on the field, then Vampire Familiar becomes a lot more useful, because you'd be able to summon the card that you get during the same turn. But that's just a little taste of what you can do with Vampires. There's a lot of kind of unique things that you get from playing this deck that you don't get from playing other zombie-type decks, and they also just look really good. So, I mean, if you're going to play a long tournament, you might as well do it with cards that you like seeing all day. And I think that the art for these are excellent. I really like how they play. So if you've got your Unizombies ready and you're looking for somewhere to use them, I'd recommend Vampires. And I'll see you next time.